Build Your Business listeners. This is Matt Reynolds, your host for the podcast, and you are listening to what we are calling the legacy episodes. And really, these are the pre-episodes that really led to this podcast, the Build Your Business podcast. This is really my life's work and my brother's life's work in building your business. And so they were originally published in the Barbell Logic podcast as part of the Principles or Coaching Success series, but really touch on similar topics to the Build Your Business podcast: how to improve your productivity, how to set and accomplish your goals, deprioritize urgent tasks, to focus on what is most important to you, and most importantly, to become a better person and leader and business owner overall. I'm proud to bring you these podcasts. Again, many years of life's work, several years of podcasts, and several decades of business ownership. Hope you enjoy them and learn from them. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship. You're listening to the Barbell Logic podcast. This is a Principles series edition, Sunday morning. Good Sunday morning to you. And sitting here with Nikki and Andrew again, knocking out podcasts, as you guys might have picked up over the last several podcasts. Mm-hmm. They have been frequent guests because they're here. We're doing work together and haven't seen each other all through the COVID crazy. And nice. We were able to get together and knock out a bunch of good work. And so one of the things we want to do is talk through and record some podcasts together. And so we wanted to talk, Nikki, this is a big piece of really what you do for us at Barbell Logic, but also something I think that I've watched you build your own principle around this, is the importance of boundaries, even with things that are your passion.
Yeah, this has been on my mind a lot lately, and it's like really taking shape to be one of the most important parts of my job, and also just how I've set my life up around it is like, we are all doing this. We're coaching because we freaking love coaching. We love watching people get stronger and stronger. Like, it brings us a lot of joy every day. Mm-hmm. But, you know, we've also been doing this for 3.5 years. And whenever you're doing anything that you love, your passion becomes your job. But there has to be there has to be structure, and there have to be boundaries so that you still maintain some passion, and it doesn't just feel like, it doesn't feel too much like a job. You still get to find enjoyment out of it. So it might seem maybe counterintuitive to be like, this is my passion. I'm going to do it exactly how I want it. I'm just going to just go for broke on this vision and chase this goal. But like, you have to have the right boundaries to protect yourself from burning out. And you have to have some sort of structure so that you're actually meeting expectations. Because if you are doing this for your job, you're doing this for money, and you're doing this for other people. Mm-hmm. And so you're trying to fulfill promises to someone. Sure. And if you're unreliable in your consistency and your deliverable, then you're not going to get to do your passion for your job anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Because you're not meeting expectations.
This, we're speaking in terms of sort of occupational passion, but the reality is this applies to literally anything that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Right? These boundaries we've all done these things. Like, there's been times in our lives where we were, so passionate about maybe training, the training the training life balance gets thrown out of whack because even things that are good things. And so certainly we know about, people can develop addictions to things that are inherently unhealthy and can throw off those that balance. And but I think that for some people, work that you're passionate about, that's a great thing. Mm-hmm. But it can, if the boundaries aren't there, eventually we have problems. Yeah. Right? Your kids are a great thing. But we all know people, like, their entire identity is their children and how their children perform in Little League and those are not good boundaries either. So while kids are wonderful, there have to be boundaries around all of those things. So good things especially.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Yes.
What is a boundary?
A boundary is you saying no. Or you deciding to say no, and yeah, I think that it's actually as concise as it needs to be, is deciding to say no.
Yeah, like here's the start point and here's the stop point.
Yeah.
And sticking to that.
There's an on and an off.
It has to be an on and an off.
Yeah. Like one example is when I'm training, I've made a rule that I don't look at work stuff while I'm training. I don't really love to coach and lift at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, depending on who it's with, but like that makes it too difficult for me to enjoy my training.
Right.
And I don't feel like the person I'm coaching is getting the coach Nikki that they should be getting.
Right.
So even in my gym space, like that needs to be gym space. That's time for fun. And this is something that's started to creep into like my workstation at home. Like everybody's working from home now, is like, sleep hygiene, where you're just like no screens or whatever, like you only sleep and have biblical relations in bed. But you don't watch stuff. You like don't do anything else in bed. And I've started to try to bring that into my office at my desk, where it's like, okay, I'm not going to eat at my desk.
Right.
I'm not going to, and I'm still not doing very well at this one, guys. I'm not going to online shop at my desk. I'm
Desk
not going to
for
look at
work,
Instagram at my desk.
Not for entertainment. And we're using desk for entertainment space.
That's interesting.
And so what that allows for, though, is like you end up being more present to what you're supposed to be doing then.
Yep.
So when you're working, or when I'm working at my desk, then I'll work better, and then I'll be done sooner. So then I can go train. And then when I'm training, I'll get to train.
Right.
I'll have my 2 hours of training.
You know what I find is interesting about boundaries, that often when someone is upset about some sort of interpersonal relationship issue, could be anything, could be a coach-client relationship, could be a friend, family, there is a boundary violation occurring that one or the other person doesn't recognize, nor are they taking ownership of holding that boundary. But they're getting upset about the fact that they're feeling like they've had a boundary violated.
Do you have a specific example of this?
So like let's say a client schedules or calls you after 5 o'clock or whatever your hours are.
Yeah.
You answer the call and you spend an hour and a half talking to that client.
Yeah.
And then you get mad at the client for calling you.
Yeah.
Well, no, the client is not the problem there.
Yeah.
You as the coach need to turn your phone off, or like actually say no.
Right.
So a lot of times I think what is happening when somebody gets upset in that kind of a situation is that the individual is failing to say no.
Right.
And then getting mad at the other person for
It's
their
the
lack
idea
of
of
holding the
respecting
boundary.
boundaries. You'll hear people say, and this is not a specific thing that I'm thinking about one of our staff members or anything, but in general, I've done this before, where you'll say, so-and-so is not respecting my boundaries. And in reality,
you're not respecting
I'm
your
not
boundaries.
You're not
boundaries.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because I allowed someone else to cross that, and so that so you think about boundaries. When I first think of just the word boundary, I almost think of like the edge of the road driving, right? And the goal is to keep it between the lines, right? And if you veer too far outside the lines, you literally drive off of the road, like completely off the road. And so that's what this is that, and from a business standpoint, especially for business owners or for people who are brand new in a position that they are incredibly passionate about, I do think it's fine for a time to just go crazy on it.
Yeah.
But what we have to understand is that it's completely unsustainable without the boundaries. Like you can't, it doesn't matter what it is. And so I love my job. I love it. I get so much value from this. But there have been lots of times, especially in the last year and a half, where there have been weeks at a time or months at a time where I did not love it. And it wasn't because of the job itself. It's because there were boundaries being crossed and sometimes some of those were very much on me, and I had to take responsibility, and some of those get thrown in your lap sometimes. But when I'm able to create those boundaries, when I'm able to do those things, like work downstairs in my office from 5 a.m. to noon, or 5 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. in my office, all I do in my office is work in my office. We don't do anything outside of work in my office. And then if I want to be creative, I come up here to the library, and I still might do work, but it's creative work. My office is set up to do like sort of
You're at your computer and,
spreadsheet work, and exactly. And so I don't like bringing my computer up to the library to do that sort of work, and I don't like doing creative work in my office because my office feels sort of a little more stiff.
Yeah,
and it's for churning out,
being productive.
Yeah, being productive, high output.
So, do you have any pro tips that you've developed or skills that you've developed that help you set or hold boundaries?
Yeah, there are some things that we use, like even just using TrueCoach for our coach-client relationship. There's the portal. We know exactly what's going to be happening through there. And it's a tab that we can close. It's not a client emailing you all the time. They're not DMing you workout videos. They're not sending you stuff on Instagram. Like that creates a boundary. Another thing that we all use pretty well is Calendly, which is a really cool scheduling app. It's not really an app. I guess it is, whatever.
Yeah.
But you set up your availability for calls. You set up your availability.
Right.
You decide when you are available and you decide when you are not available, and people can schedule right then. So it also just lets them know, okay, I get to speak with Andrew for 1 hour on Tuesday.
Right.
So instead of like trying to get your attention in whatever ways, by texting you, by Instagramming you, by whatever, they know there's a space for them to be heard by you.
Yeah, and when they're doing that other one, they're doing it a lot of times outside your boundary of when it's acceptable to talk.
Right.
And when you're able to go into Calendly and Andrew got to choose what times he's available, then there's some relief probably there, even on the part of the client, that they say, I'm choosing a time that he's already told me that he's available and is open for these calls.
Exactly.
Rather than, and that's it, for us, we have clients all over the world, so in every time zone. And so it's things like that. Do you think that even outside the coaching world, that the very first thing for most people, like the very first action step for people listening to this, for our listeners, to create boundaries is to work through the calendar, through the day-to-day 24-hour period, or the weekly calendar, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I do these things from this time to this time. Is that a great place to start?
Yeah, that's another thing that I was going to answer your question with, Andrew, is organizing your calendar so that things that you have to do have a place, and things that you want to do have a place. Yeah. And people can arrange that in their own ways, but like all on my calendar, I like to make sure I go watch the sunset a couple of times a week. So I legit have the sunset calendar linked to my calendar, right? So I give it, so I can go do it. But then I'll also have like my routine daily activities in there. Like, okay, this is when I'm doing client check-ins. And when I'm done with client check-ins, I'm done with client check-ins. Yeah. And then I'll list out like my HR things, and I'll have a place for everything to get done. So by organizing in that way, your work doesn't creep into the rest of your day.
Yeah.
I find that's really important.
Yeah. That's good.
And then even like with training and jiu-jitsu, like there's a regular schedule. Yeah. I find it very helpful that it's just like, I lift Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I jiu-jitsu Tuesday, Thursday. And that's how it is. But I like it because then I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then another thing that we've been working on, since I feel like we're responsible for people's passions at our job. And that's actually something that I should not feel responsible for, because that's too heavy a burden really. But I feel like we tend to take that on, is having very clearly defined responsibilities and expectations, right? So we have to make it clear what we're expecting of people who coach for us and people who work for us. And we have to make it very clear what we're giving them in return. Yeah. And that's just, that's an important part. Yeah. Communicating the boundary, and then really doing everything we can to avoid building resentment. And that happens, like, we can have resentment towards ourselves when we don't respect our own boundaries. And then we can have resentment towards another person when we don't have those boundaries and expectations established.
That's right.
And, we want relationships and coaching and lifting to be this like fun, maybe more like free flowing kind of thing. But like,
right.
There will be a point when it doesn't work.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you have to make clearer outlines at certain times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For our coaches, I think one of the things that we always try to do is we try to do the vast majority of the non-coaching stuff so that the coaches can coach, so that it allows them to do the thing that they're passionate about and be present in it. When coaches, or regardless of the profession, when you're doing the thing that you're passionate about, but it all of a sudden it gets bogged down in the minutia of meetings and jumping through hoops and administrative duties, and then that's a great way to rob you of passion for that very thing. And then, you know, we were a startup, and we were a startup of friends who all coached together. And while I felt like at the time we had really good systems in place, and maybe we did have good systems in place for that, for as early as we were, we all have responsibilities and expectations for our positions now. Like, there are clearly defined, like this, you know, like, so when you talk about creating those responsibilities and expectations for other people in the business, you have one too, that we sat down and worked through. So this is so that you know what your boundaries are and what the expectations. And to me, I've talked about this before with issues like transparency. To me, being transparent is freedom for me, not bondage. Boundaries are the same thing. Boundaries for me create like what feels like I can go.
Right.
Yes. You have to be unavailable so that you can be available.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Andrew said for sure, and I think maybe you also said the word once during this podcast, was being present.
Yeah.
Boundaries allow you to be present in all of the different things that are important in your life. If you don't have good boundaries and you want to be present with your spouse or with your kids, but you don't have good boundaries, so work or other things continue to interfere with that, then you're actually present with none of them. And so I want to be very present in all of the things that's important, but if without the boundaries to say, like, this is when I do this, so that I can spend time with the family during this time, then
that was one of the biggest things that I struggled with transitioning out of my corporate life. When I had a commute to work, there was a very clear physical kind of transformational process that happened by just driving for 30 minutes. And so it was drive for 30 minutes. I could listen to a podcast, kind of be in the zone. And then I get to work. I'm at work. And then there was a 30-minute kind of unwind process. And my daughter's
into husband and dad.
My daughter's actually even called me out on it. Like, it used to be when you came home from work, you were daddy, and you're not. Now you're work daddy all the time.
There we go.
So like, I've had to really work on trying to make my because I work in the garage. Basically, I have a desk out there. Trying to make that manufacture or create that transition because I don't have it just built in.
You walk back into the house,
right? And I think that's
daddy time.
A common way that you end up in a situation where you fail to maintain boundaries is when there's something that by luck or happenstance or circumstance, a boundary is created that you don't realize is there. You're not aware of it. And then something changes. Same reason why you don't usually recommend going into business with friends.
Right.
Because there's all these unspoken boundaries that all of a sudden get blurred, muddied. And if you're not super careful about defining those roles and expectations or what those boundaries are, then the next thing you know, you're upset at each other because you've just crossed a bunch of boundaries.
Well, marriage is the exact same way, right? I mean, you'll never learn more about boundaries and relationships than you will in a long-term marriage to have to figure out like what those boundaries are. And when you talk about going into business with friends, it's a marriage. It's a legal marriage is what it is. And so you can't take either one of those lightly. Right. And those boundaries have to be, you think about how often psychiatrists, psychologists would talk about the primary problem in a marriage is the lack of communication. And what it really probably is, it's a lack of communication of the boundaries and expectations for each person. Like, I expect you to be here at this point or to do this and be present then. And I think when I think about that for us, even for Rachel and I, like our biggest conflicts have been when we had different expectations and therefore different boundaries, because where my boundaries, where I thought they were not where she thought they were,
right?
And that creates problems. And so to be able to communicate that has been very helpful for us in the business, that's been one of those things that I think are one of our growing pains. That we've had to learn how to adapt to. That as the business has grown, like we want to be able to help our coaches have.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to figure that out as we get bigger.
Yeah, what is it?
More complicated as we get bigger.
Where do you see that playing out? Like, where do you want to? Is there something that you're trying to do different going forward?
Yeah, like I think what's happened over the last even year, Andrew, since you joined the team, was there was some. It wasn't always clear what you did versus what I do, right? For our coaches. And I think that was still a little bit vague even a couple months ago, but it's getting more and more well-defined. And so that makes, like what we're trying to do, like Matt just said, is make it easier for coaches to coach. And even by creating that clarity, we make it easier for them to do their jobs. So stuff like that where roles are very defined, and we're going to be working on making all of our internal systems and everything very, very transparent so that coaches can get all the answers that they need without like having to be bogged down in, well, who do I email and how do I get there? You know, because if you're going to create a schedule, a structure, you want that time to be very, very efficient. Like Matt was saying, you don't just want to be buried in processes. So that's what we're trying to do here is keep making it easier for coaches to coach and make it really easy for people to work, and then making it easy for them to not work.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's what I'm hearing almost is that lack of clarity around boundaries creates a lot of inefficiency.
Yeah.
And waste and frustration
and often future resentment.
Yeah.
Right. Animosity gets built up for those things. So I think a great takeaway here for the episode for our listeners is there is almost always an actionable item that comes out of these principles episodes, that the actionable item is you actually need to create boundaries. And my worry about saying that is that everyone will listen to that and go, yeah, I need to create boundaries. No. We're literally saying you should get a piece of paper out or get on your computer and start with your daily calendar and decide what time you're going to get up in the morning, what time you're going to go to bed. That's probably the first thing to start. And everybody knows that I pull the neat dad, early to bed, early to rise, but I actually don't think that matters. I actually think what matters is consistency.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to sleep till 10 and stay up till 2 or whatever, and you still get your 8 hours of sleep or however much sleep that you need, I actually think that's fine if that's what works for you. And those allows you to follow your passions. And then you start to fill that daily schedule up. For some people, they'll fill the daily schedule. For the very OCD ones, they'll want almost every minute of that daily calendar filled up, and those will be the boundaries for them. I mean, because they'll work in everything, right? They'll work in sunsets, and they'll work in training time, and they'll work in eating time, and all this. And for other people, they're going to want a lot more flexibility. But the point is, do you have that start and stop button for all the major things in your life? That's what the boundary is. And so literally take some time this week and think about, when do you start your job or your passion? When do you stop it, right? If your work is not your passion, when do you start your work and end your work? If you have a family, you have a spouse, you have kids, when is that start and stop? And be able to live in those boundaries, because that's where you're able to be most present. Yeah. Even if you work a job that you aren't passionate about and you follow your passion after hours, you'll be a much better worker at your job, and you'll get more joy out of a job that you're not passionate about if you have clear boundaries around that thing too.
Right. You have to create the space for yourself to do that.
That's exactly right.
And then my takeaway for people would be, for those things that are important to you for work and lifting and being with your family, like make them, especially because we're all at home right now, everything isn't opened up yet, unless you're in Springfield, make those parts of your day special so that they're different from each other.
Yes.
So like, even for me, like I don't wear what I'm going to work out in while I'm for the beginning part of my day. I will change into other workout pants when I go train. And like I might even listen to different types of music.
Yes.
Like little things and I don't have a huge house. I work downstairs in my living room. So I just try to make everything like special from each other for the rest of the day. So see how you could do that. Like when you go into your gym, like make that area of your house special.
Yes. That's good. Good. Thank you for talking about that principle. That's an important one.
Thanks for letting me blab.
Absolutely. You have been listening to a Barbell Logic podcast, the Principles series. Every week on Sunday, we will talk about principles that are important in our life, things that we've learned, things we've done well, things we've done not so well, and had to learn principles because of places that we've struggled. And so we hope this brings you value. And we will see you tomorrow morning for the Monday morning podcast. See you then. Bye.